Kwame, when we get the opportunity to serve, always makes me happy.
Mm.
Um, Even in the most difficult of situations, a few people came in sometime last week and were able to make some difficult diagnosis.
Wow.
And for me, that excites me because it just shows you our diagnostic acumen sharp
Mm-hmm.
enough and early detection. Early detection. Even if the situation is bad enough, early detection makes a world of difference. So, yes, this week I was happy that one particular diagnosis, a bit difficult, but we were able to clinch it. Makes me happy.
Right. Well, I'm happy for you and your
Mm.
team. I know you guys are always up to the task. Well, today we get to talk about sickle cell, don't we?
Ah, yes. Kwabe, it is one of those disease conditions that it goes outside of medicine,
Mm.
and it becomes a social problem or a social challenge. So it's something that I think most people know about right now, especially because of the modern churches and their
Yeah.
approach to doing things.
It's become like a,
Obewarepa,
a topic in the counseling sessions, huh?
exactly, it features prominently.
Right.
But I think I'm happy that today we get to take a deep dive because there's still quite a fair bit of things we don't understand about sickle cell.
Well, earlier I asked people the last time they check whether they know their status and what made them check. And
Aha.
Eric from NIA sent me a message. Says, Lexis, this sickle cell status, huh? I went to check 2 months ago and they tell me that it's inconclusive. What does that even mean at all?
Yeah.
They asked if I had done blood transfusions before because they
Mm-hmm.
couldn't tell. So, in effect, I still don't know. I'm not really bothered because wifey is AA. So that
Okay.
came from Eric a little earlier today.
Right.
But let me
Interesting.
share this issue with you, and probably you can give more clarity to it. This one
Right.
here says, I'm a 35-year-old Ghanaian academic working in the USA. So I was in Ghana for holidays and decided to take my annual medical exam in Ghana for the first time.
Mm.
I met an absolutely charming doctor and her staff in a clinic in Tema. After a thorough history, she developed a list of tests for me to perform.
Okay.
It included a test for diabetes control. Yep, I have a rich family history of diabetes mellitus. I went back 2 days later for my result. The doctor informed me that among the many other things that I am a carrier of a sickle cell, the sickle cell gene, that
Okay.
is my hemoglobin type, was AC.
Mm.
She indicated to me that this test was carried out purely to validate the diabetes test. The information hit me like a thunderbolt. I mean, I've never been sick before. I mean, really, really sick, requiring hospital admission.
Okay.
I know a thing or two about sickle cell, and that's really that it's a really bad disease that keeps the sufferer in and out of hospital. When I finally gathered my thoughts, I asked the doctor, I can't just marry anyone at all, can I? I do not think I recall her long answer, but I still have the A4 sheet of paper with some permutations and combinations of alphabets. Lexus, I listened to you via my Joe online in the USA.
Mm.
When the time permits and I know about the drive doctor, are you able to get him to discuss my peculiar AC genotype and the whole concept of who you can marry and not marry? Thank you, and I look forward to hearing you and the drive doctor. So there you go.
Oh wow. Good.
And I'm pretty sure she's listening now from the USA.
Yes, I am. I hope she is listening in as well. So, good afternoon to all our listeners. And Kwame, we are going to talk about sickle cell disease and take a close look at the angle of genetic counseling and the prevention of the disease. And before we do that, June 19th every year is World Sickle Cell Day. And it's a day that has been set aside. It was adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations to draw attention to this particular medical condition. So, Kwame, sickle cell disease is an inherited disorder, or is a group of inherited disorders that affects something we call hemoglobin, which can be found inside your red blood cells. All right, this hemoglobin is a molecule or is a pigment that carries oxygen around your body. So at one level, we would say that red cells, the job of the red cells is to carry oxygen around the body, but it's able to do that because of the presence of hemoglobin. And this hemoglobin has a peculiar, structure. And unfortunately, its genetic code, sometimes there is a mutation in the genetic code, a change that happens to the set of instructions that makes it look and perform a certain way. And whenever that mutation happens, then you form a different type of hemoglobin, which would have a different structure and different function. So the normal variant hemoglobin, we give it a name and we use an alphabet, A, to represent it. All right? So I need to stress this point. Now, when we talk about sickle cell status, it is very different from your blood group, although it's all going on in the blood.
Okay.
It's very easy for people to confuse it because, again, you would hear about blood group A,
Yeah.
and you hear about blood group O, and B and so on and so forth. But we're talking about sickle cell status and it has nothing to do with your blood group type. So the normal variant is A. Now, this A is disc shaped and very flexible and allows it to be able to move freely within the blood vessels, which have a cylindrical shape or lumen. When your cells don't have this A, or they become, or in sickle cell disease, because the hemoglobin is now different, because of that genetic mutation that has happened within it, then the cell becomes sickle shaped or crescentic. The half moon, all right? The crescent. We've also heard about the red crescent. I mean, our Islamic brothers would know about that. Look into the sky at night, you'd find the half moon. And that is exactly how your red cells look like instead of looking like a CD-ROM. All right? And when they adopt that shape, they become very rigid instead of being flexible. And they tend to occlude the cylindrical lumen of the blood vessels, blocking it partially or sometimes fully and preventing the flow of blood to various tissues of the body, leading to terrible complications. Sickle cell is found in certain parts of the world and then also in certain groups or races of people. So, Kwame, it is very, very prevalent or has high prevalence in sub-Saharan Africa. So, I would say people of African origin have a high prevalence of this genetic disease. Also, if you look at the Mediterranean regions, so Sicily or Italy, Turkey, Cyprus, Malta, and countries along the Mediterranean, then people who are originally from there also tend to suffer from sickle cell. Another geographic area is the Middle East, and then certain parts of Southeast Asia. So it is erroneous for you to think that it's quote, an African, sub-Saharan African disease, an African disease. But most people confuse it and say, oh, it's a black people's disease. But then again, Kwame, when we say regions of the world, these days a global village. So people move around.
Yeah.
Right. So I was shocked when somebody told me I knew had emigrated to Sweden. I was like, hey, now Sweden, so like when you are in Ghana thinking that you want to go somewhere, I don't think Sweden ever crossed my mind. It was like, hey, there are plenty Ghanaians here. I was like, hey, recently
I got a call from Helsinki. One of my friends,
so because of that, it is very possible now to see the disease in different parts of the world. So I like people to think about people who originally came from these parts of the world that I mentioned: Sub-Saharan Africa, the Mediterranean, Middle East, Southeast Asia, who have now moved to different parts of the world. Kwame, in Ghana, a study by one of my colleagues and a good friend, Dr. Asare, who works at the Clinical Genetics Institute in Kolebu, in 2018, showed a prevalence of about 2% of all babies or newborns who had sickle cell. This is about 15,000 babies. So it is it has a very high prevalence. Another study puts the carrier or the trait, which I would explain in a bit, rate at between 20 and 25%. All right. So that's quite a very high prevalence. Now, once we are talking about genetics mutation, then we know that this thing is passed on. And I like this Akan proverb when we want to promote family unity and sort of like dissuade people from thinking in being individualistic. We would say that yampai ubia mfiduem ubia fiabusuem.
Yeah.
You know, so you come from a family, and that family will pass on its genetic code. So, Kwame, when we talk about your DNA, then we are talking about that molecule that carries your genetic instructions, that shows how things would be, your structure will be organized. So, when there is a defect in the way that code, these days a lot of young people are doing coding, so they would understand this.
Yeah.
There is a certain code that shows what type of hemoglobin you are supposed to make. If there is a defect in it, then you form an S. So when we talk about genetic counseling, we want to give out information to the general population, first and foremost, to know your sickle cell status, and then secondly, to decide who you want to make the next human with. It's not about marriage. It's about who you want to make a baby with. So I know that in our relatively conservative society, we would always equate the two. But from my medical chair, I always try and separate the two.
Okay.
You can get married and not have biological children with your spouse. It's entirely possible. So we don't want to prevent you from getting married, but I want to be clear that if the issue is about offspring, then you should know that the genetic material that you are carrying is very, very important. So Kwame, let's do some permutation and combination, because that's what our friend mentioned, that the doctor took a sheet and then do some permutations and combinations with some alphabets. So the normal hemoglobin variant is A. If you form an abnormal one, we label it S. There are other abnormal ones, but let's stick with this for now. Humans are generally categorized into three populations with respect to the sickle cell genotype. So you will always need two copies because you are made from your mother's genetic material and your father's genetic material. All right? So we have 23 pairs of chromosomes, and these 23 pairs would always have to split during reproduction. So your sperms always carry half the number, and then the eggs will also carry half the number, one half. And then when they come together, then the next human would get the full complement. But if you don't split your genetic material into two, then you are going to form an alien, not another human being, because that person then would have double, because he's getting the full complement from you, getting the full complement from the mother, so then she's going to get double the number. But you should split and then you get half. So Kwame, the groups are AA, AS, and then SS. These are the three populations that you generally would have when it comes to sickle cell. So, Kwame, think of the Ludo, the game of Ludo. We roll the dice. And I haven't seen anybody cheat at Ludo before. Because when you roll the dice, you really can't predict what is coming.
Dadiga.
Then they spin the tail like that, then it's going round. Yes, so it's really a game of chance. So I want you to picture that. And later on, I'll pay tribute to a great man, Professor Felix Israel Domenyo Konote Aholu. He was a great man in the field of medicine. Sadly, he passed on May 27th. It was announced. He was 96 years old,
Wow.
and he is an absolute authority when it came to sickle cell disease. Distinguished Kwejuyagre Professor of Clinical Genetics at the University of Cape Coast, as well. So he developed something he called the Canad, and it's a pair of dice, all right, that has these inscriptions on them. So if you have AA as your sickle cell genotype, you're normal in the sense that you will not get sickle cell, which in Twi we call ahututu, and I think the Gans call it Twi. So I mean, people should send us what they call it in Ewe and Hausa and all of that, Dagati, Dagumba, Inzima. They should let us know, because I think there are local names for all of these because it's so common. All right. So an AA person, during reproduction, when you are making a baby with another person, you will split the AA into two, and you can only give one A during the reproductive process.
Meaning that you would make another AA.
So if you meet someone, your partner is also AA, they can only also give an A.
Yeah.
And therefore your offspring would always be AA and nothing else.
Okay.
Next permutation.
That's AS.
AS. Right. And one will stick to the female being AA, for this round of permutations.
Right.
All right. So you've picked AS
Yeah.
as the man.
Yeah.
And then the female is AA.
AS.
AA. We're going to go to AA. The man is AS.
Okay, AS.
And then the female will still have to be AA.
Yeah.
We want to just go through that.
Right.
Right. So in terms of a split, what is going to happen is that the man would either produce an A or an S when they roll the dice. It's always going to be one of these. So, and the female egg is always going to produce an A because she's AA.
Right.
So if the man produces an A, it couples with the A from the female, and then the child becomes an AA. No problem there. But what if the man produces the S, and then it couples with the A from the female, then you would produce AS. It means this person carries the sickle cell trait, the gene. So we say she has a trait. Another important point is that the A is always the dominant version. So the S will never be able to express itself, and this person will never get ahututu, will never get sickle cell crisis. But you carry the trait. Third combination. The man is what? SS, and then the female is AA again. The man would only produce an S when he splits the SS, and then the female will only produce an A. So all of their children, anytime, will be carriers. They would all be AS.
AS.
Now let's make it a bit more interesting. Man is AS. Woman you marry to is AS. So, Kwame, what do you think is going to happen? What are the possibilities from the man's side?
So the man could actually offer an A or an S.
An A or an S.
And the woman will also offer an A or an S.
Or an S. Wonderful.
So there could be an AA.
Mm-hmm.
There could be an AS.
Wonderful.
or an SS?
10 over 10. So the possibility is that whenever an AS male marries an AS female, their first child, their second child, their third child, their fourth child, any child that they have can be AS, can be SS, and can be AA. You just don't know what is going to come up. It's a roll of the dice. It is not as if, they said 1 in, so because they did the combination, it's 1 in 3. So if the first one I got AS, it means the second one I will get. No. It's like anytime you roll the dice, anytime you attempt to make a baby, we're saying that you don't know what is going to come up. But the possibilities are there.
Okay.
So, people have asked the question many times. If I am AS, who should I wrongly say marry? But I think the question they want to ask is, who should I have a baby with?
Okay.
If I want to prevent this disease from ever happening. Well, then, Kwame, the simple answer is that if you are AS, meaning you carry the sickle cell trait, then to be absolutely sure that no child will be SS, you should marry somebody who is what?
AA.
AA. And have a baby with somebody who is AA. Yes. To be absolutely sure.
That's the only way to be sure.
That's the only way to be sure. Because then the other way, if you take any other person, you're rolling the dice. You're taking a gamble. And as we rightly pointed out, you could be AA, and all the children you have could be AA.
Yeah.
But Kwame, you and I, how many times do we win the lottery?
Indeed.
Never. So that's I want people to understand that this is the reality of it. But so many times, unfortunately, I've seen people's judgment absolutely clouded by love and the desire. I found this man, he's so sweet, he's there. Yeah, maybe you can get married, but offspring, no. But when you and I, you know that in our country, you cannot get married and then 6 months, you are not showing a bump.
Go and tell your mom that, it's because we are AS, so we don't want to.
Because, don't you believe in God? Then you will bring that one in and even spoil the matter. Cry. I mean, all these genetic diseases are there. It doesn't mean as if anybody who is a carrier, was not made by God. All of us were made by God. All these things are possibilities. But sickle cell is such a terrible disease for the sufferers that you don't want to deliberately bring somebody into the world and you knew that, I could have avoided this situation.
Yeah.
Now, another important point is that, Kwame, there are other abnormal hemoglobins, all right, beyond the S. So there's hemoglobin C, which is what our friend talked to us about.
Yeah.
All right. And anytime the S combines with any other abnormal hemoglobin, such as a C, then you produce what you call an SC. That also gives you ache, or ahututu.
Oh, okay.
Albeit a milder form compared to the SS.
Okay.
Again, the study I quoted earlier by my colleagues mentioned that in their study, they found about 39.7% of all the reported cases of sickle cell at the National Clinical Genetics Institute in Kolebu to be of the SC variety.
Oh, I see.
Yes, SS was more. It was almost about 56%, but 39% was an SC.
Okay.
Right.
What about AC?
Right. So AC also, that's the trait. That means you're a carrier of an abnormal hemoglobin, the C.
Yeah.
So in that instance, you also then have to be careful. If you go for someone, you want to make a baby with someone who is AS and you are AC, If you split during the reproduction process, you will produce an A and a C. And if you donate the C, and the female also splits and produces an A and an S, and she donates the S, then you can make SC. And that child will have sickle cell disease. Again, you being AC, if you have a woman who is AC as well, during the reproduction, you can produce your C, she also gives off her C, and then you form CC, which is also another type of sickle cell condition. It gives you the ache or the ahututu. So A is the only normal variant.
Okay.
That is what we should have. And you should have two copies of that. And there are so many other abnormal ones.
So just based on your explanation, if I was to rate severity,
Right.
I would, and this is just my lay thoughts, right?
Sure. Go ahead.
SS would be very severe.
At the top.
SC is below,
Yes.
but also a carrier and serious.
Yeah, SC is also sickle cell disease.
Okay.
Because there's an S and there's another abnormal hemoglobin.
C.
And it gives you ahuntutu, it gives you that bone pain crisis and all of that. But it's a milder form.
Okay.
They don't have all the clinical features that you tend to see with the sickle cell.
Okay.
So a milder form, yes.
And then maybe coming in third place would be AC.
No, so then the CC,
Okay, CC.
CC they would
comes
also
in.
have the problem.
Yeah.
The rest are then carriers.
Okay.
The moment you have an A, the A would overshadow the other. It will not allow them to express themselves.
All right. Okay.
All right?
At all.
At all.
Never.
But you carry it.
Okay.
You're a carrier. It's hiding. And that's why sometimes you have these confusions. Sometimes it even breaks the marriage. Because the man says, I'm normal, and then you are also normal. So why is it that we have a child who was that? Okay. So that is a very dangerous situation because you don't know, because you are fine. You never had any problem.
Yeah.
I mean, rounding up, I know our time is far gone. I would say that testing exists. Testing exists. So you need to just walk in, and test and know your sickle cell status. Don't test when you have been working with this man, you are in love, it's 6 months or something to the marriage, you are not coming to test. Then test now.
I think that it should be one of the first questions during courting.
Yes, offer a card into it. You should declare your assets.
Yeah, sharp.
You should declare your assets. It's very, very, very important. But you must know yours first.
Yeah.
Before you ask somebody to declare theirs. All right? So it's very, very important that we do that.
Doc, give us your number because I know people have questions about this.
Right. So the number is 0501 477 340. 0501 477 340.
Yeah, this has been some really good education, Dr. Osafo. I'm grateful that you shared with us. And Dr. Osafo, CEO of Medicast Hospital. Next week, we'll have another conversation. I'm grateful. Thank you, Doc.
Sure.
All right, it's 5 o'clock. Let's find out what's happening in news.
Hello, good evening, and time for